So the sun, it's coming in really stark. There's like a window in the house, and at this time of day, right now it's 5:30 p.m. So around this time of day, the sun, it comes right through that window. There's no like curtains at that part of the window. The sun comes right through, stark, and then it bounces off the floor. I've complained about this in the past. So it bounces off the floor and right into my eyes. So what I did was, I took some like towels and stuff and I put it on the floor. I think it might be working. How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're starting off Vav, I think, of Masechta Kiddushin. Alright, great. I don't really remember what it talks about, but it just talks about Kiddushin kind of stuff. Don't worry, I'm prepared. Don't worry, I'm prepared. But whatever it is, talk about Kiddushin, I think. Alright. Okay, Davav, Masechta Kiddushin. Here we go. 3 lines into the page. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. Hareat Ishti, right by the 2 dots. So if a fellow says, Hareat Ishti, you are my wife. Hareat Arusasi, you are my betrothed. Hareat Knuyali, you are acquired to me. Mikudeshes. That counts, right? It's Kiddushin. Hareat Shali, you're mine. Hareat Birshusi, you are in my domain. Hareat Zkukali, you are connected to me. Mikudeshes, that also works. Okay, very, very romantic guy over here. V'leisninu kulu kechada. Why did we divide up that brisa in 2? I don't understand. We listed 6 things. It listed 3 of them, mikudeshes. Another 3 of them, mikudeshes. Why not just list all 6 of them and say mikudeshes? Tana tlas shaminu vigarsinu. So the Tana heard them in batches of 3. So that's how he taught them, was in batches of 3. It's interesting if you think about, like, who were these Tanas, right? These Tanas who were teaching these brises. They would, my understanding is, this is Torah Shabbal Peh, right? This was, if it's like an Amora, but we've seen, I think, in places in the Gemara that even during the time of the Amoraim, like, they were still a shtickle wary of writing things down. I mean, until Rebbe, the Torah Shabbal Peh was not written down. Rebbe wrote down the Mishnayos, Eis Lasos Lashem, Iferi Torah Secho. Rebbe wrote down the Mishnayos. During times of Reb Meir, Reb Akiva, Reb Yehuda, things weren't written down. We learned about in these places, I believe they're called Megillah Starim. Is that what it's called? If you had to write something down, you had to then get rid of it or hide it away or something. So anyways, things were so right, so they only wrote it down during the time of Rebbe. I mean, during the time of Amoraim, it's, shortly after that, for what was it, thousands of years, the Torah Shabbal Peh was transmitted orally. The point that I'm getting to is that, how do you avoid broken telephone, right? Well, it's important that, to be exact, if the Tana heard, it taught, grouped into, 3, a list of 3 mikudeshes, another list of 3 mikudeshes. That's how he taught it. The way you heard it, that's how it was taught. You don't mess around with it, because we had to preserve the authenticity of the Torah Shabbal Peh. Anyways, maybe I'm reading into it, but I imagine that that's true, right? That like, who are these Tanas, right? You learn Trei Tanoia, Liba, de whatever. They were saying this was the traditions that they heard, and I guess that's maybe what it means, that sometimes there was some broken telephone. I don't want to say anything, but it's interesting to think about this as an entirely oral tradition, and maybe I'm reading into this too much, I don't know. But the Tana heard it this way. That's how he taught it. He taught it exactly how he was heard. Fine. Even though, yeah, sure, technically speaking, it could make sense to just list all 6 and say Mikudeshes, but he was saying it the way that he heard it, and that, I guess that I don't know, I'm thinking that's important. Okay, weiter. Ibailu, this is very nice that I have these towels on the floor. I feel like I tricked the sun. But I'm also nervous that the sun is going to get the last laugh, because it's kind of a moving target, and I'm nervous it's going to start bouncing right next to me. And then I have a shayla, do I go move the towels or not? I don't like to move when I'm recording, got my microphone and everything. They asked the kasha. Miyuchedesli. What if you say you're miyuchedesli? Rashi says it's like v'hayu lebasar echad, right? It says it says by Adam Arishan that there will be like one flesh. Mau. Does that work as Kiddushin? Miyuedesli. It's like yi'ud, right? It's like the when a Amo Ivria gets married, so that's called yi'ud. Mahu. Ezrasi mahu negdosi, right? Ezer kenegdos. What if he says, you are my Ezer, you are my negdi? Mahu. Atsurasi mahu, I'm going to take you home with me. Tzalasi, you're my bone. How poetic. Mahu. Sgurasi mahu. I don't know, is this like, because like, oh yeah, Rashi says, Vayiskor Basar. Okay. Tachtoy and Mahu. Okay, he says, because is that like the pasuk of, what does it say? Vayiskor Basar Tachtena. So Tachtoy, I guess, comes from that Lashon, Mahu. Tfusasi Mahu. You are my chap darain. How gorgeous. The Kuchasi Mahu. You are the one I have taken. So do these things work? Well, we can at least answer for one of them. The Tanya is within the Brayso Omer Kuchasi. If he says, you are the one who I have taken, Harezo Mekudeshes, she is betrothed. Mishum Shenemar Ki Yikach Ish Isha. Because after all, the pasuk says Ki Yikach Ish Isha, that if a fellow takes a fellow. Okay. That's a kasha. Charufasi Mahu. What if he says, you are my charufa? Tashma, come in here. Titani, we're learning the Brayso. Ha'omer charufasi mikudeshes. If a fellow says, you are my charufa, we'll see in a second. Let's just go weiter without translating it for a minute. You are my charufa, she is mikudeshes. Shekem Yehuda, korin la'arusa charufa. Because in Yehuda, in the area of Judah, so they would call a betrothed fella a charufa. Ruba Dalma. So the Gemara says, okay, that's great that in Yehuda they would call an arusa a charufa. I mean, okay, so that maybe applies to Yehuda, but outside of Yehuda where they don't call an arusa a charufa, why should that make any difference? Right? Again, Yehuda Avi Ruba Dalma, is Yehuda the majority of the world, that we should assume that because they do it like that in Yehuda, therefore everywhere in the world Charufa works for Lashon Kiddushin? Achikam, it is what it's saying. Ha'omer charufasi mikudeshes. If a fellow says, you are my charufa, it counts as Kiddushin. Shenemar, as the Paul says, v'hi shifcha nechrefes le'ish. There you go. Shifcha charufa, right? And that right. Shifcha charufa was talking about a ama ha'ivriya, a shifcha kinainis, that is 50% free, 50% baschor, eved, 50% ben chorin, baschorin, and then she was, with a eved ivri, because an eved ivri is allowed to marry shifcha knainis, and I believe that's true. And then like some guy sleeps with her. That's charufa. So like a reference like shifcha charufa. Okay, this shifcha v'hi shifcha nechrefes la'ish, and she was already with another fellow. So if you use this lashon of you are my charufa, does it work for Kiddushin? So we say that so a fellow who says charufasi mikudeshes shenemar, the Bible says v'shifcha nechrefes la'ish. So we see that the pasuk uses the word charufa. So it works. And additionally, Yehuda korin la arusa charufa. And additionally, in Yehuda they call an arusa charufa. So there you see that it works. Yehuda ve'od likra. I don't understand. We need to bring the customs of Yehuda as a support for a pasuk. What, a pasuk isn't a strong enough support? I need the minhag of Yehuda to support the pasuk. Come on, that makes no sense. Rather, okay, this is how you have to understand the Brayso. Ha'omer charufasi be Yehuda. If in Yehuda a fellow says, you are my charufa, mikudeshes, that works as Kiddushin. Shekin be Yehuda, korin arusa charufa, because in Yehuda they call an arusa a charufa. So it sounds like in Yehuda, if you say charufasi, that works. It sounds like anywhere else. It sounds to me like anywhere else, it would not work. So friends, just stick to the I don't know. I feel like maybe just stick to the traditional Hariat Mikudeshes Li B'Tabaz Zokedas Moshe B'Yisrael. That's probably the safest way to go. But Mayaskinun. Now in all these kashas, right? Does Miyuchedes Li work? Miyuedes Li, Ezrasi, etc. But Mayaskinun. Tell me more about the context. If it's talking about where they aren't talking about getting married. They're just talking about pizza. And then all of a sudden he says, you are my Ezrasi. How in the world is she supposed to know what this guy is talking about? Right? He says, right, what is it? Selasi, right? You're my bone. They're talking about pizza, and then he says, you are my bone. I was like, I don't understand. How is she supposed to realize that when he says, you are my bone, it's his way of being poetic, and he's really proposing to her. So okay, so I must be talking about where they are talking about getting married. They're talking about, wow, it would be awesome to get married, and then he's like, you are my bone. So nami, but if that's the case, that they're already talking about getting married, then even if he didn't say anything at all, and he just pulls out a ring and gives it to her and keeps his mouth shut and he doesn't say anything, that would work. The Tanan is learned in Mishnah that if a fellow was talking with a woman regarding either they're getting divorced or they're getting married, and then he gave her a get or he gave her a ring, and he didn't say what it was for, Rabbi Yossi says that that's fine. Right? The get is a good get, the Kiddushin is a good Kiddushin, even though he didn't say a thing. Because clearly if they were talking about getting married and he gives her a ring, it's Kiddushin. Whereas Rabbi says, no, you would have to explain that this is Kesef Kiddushin. Says Rav Huna in the name of Shmuel, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, that even if he says nothing, it works, right? So therefore, if he's talking to her about getting married, and then he pulls out a ring and gives it to her, he doesn't say Ariyat Mekudeshes, he just gives her a ring. Rabbi Yossi says that works for Kiddushin, and says Rav Huna in the name of Shmuel, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, that works. So therefore, if they're talking about Kiddushin, and he gives her a ring, and he says, you are my bone, that should work, because after all, even if he said nothing, it works. So says the Gemara, actually, so really they are talking about getting married. And sure, if he gave her the ring and kept quiet, sure. If they're talking about getting married and he pulls out a ring and he gives it to her and keeps his mouth shut, that works. But here it's talking about where he gives it to her, and it would have been better if he kept his mouth shut. I mean, ideally he would give it to her and say Mikudeshesli. But if he wasn't going to say that, it would be better that he keeps his mouth shut. But if he says, he gives her a ring and he says, you are my bone, or you are my Ezer, or my Kenegdi, or any of those other Lashonis, well, that's actually worse. He's actually being an idiot. He's actually making it worse. It's not going to work. And this is what the Gemara is asking. Is he saying it for Kiddushin and maybe it does work? Or maybe he's saying, no, I just want you, I don't know, to work for me or something. Take us. We say, okay, the moral of the story is, don't give a ring to your wife and say, you are my bone. Let's go weiter. Gufa. So we said earlier, so if a fellow is talking to a woman about their divorce, about them getting divorced or about them getting married, and he gave her a get or he gave her a kesef kiddushin, or kiddushin, and he didn't explain what he was doing, but they were talking about getting married and he gives her a ring. So Rabbi Yossi Omer Dayo, Rabbi Yossi says, okay, that's fine. It's clear that he's, that it's kiddushin. Rabbi Yehuda Omer tzarich lefarish, whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you need to explain. You would have to say Ariyat Mekudeshes Li. Amar of Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Vehu Shasukin Ba'oso Inyan, says Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, but they need to be dealing with that Inyan, right? They're talking about getting married. They're already talking about getting married, and he gives her a ring and keeps his mouth shut. That's fine, because they're already talking about getting married. V'chein Amar Belazar, Amar Boshaya, Shasukin Ba'oso Inyan. Oh gosh, excuse me. Oh God, I feel like it was 2 days in. I'm sorry. It says Rabbi Lazar, the name of Boshaya, Fushasukim Bo, so Indian. Oh my gosh. I was once in a groove with somebody. He's an audio editor. And he was editing a podcast. And he said the stuff he had to edit out. Anyways. Fushasukim Bo, so Indian. No, he was editing an audiobook. Okay. Also Indian. that they are taught, right? So it says Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shai that they are talking already about getting married. Rebbe says they would have to be talking about getting married, and he pops the ring. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shai Omer says Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shai even if they're not talking about getting married, and he gives her a ring, it would work. But if they aren't talking about, interesting, right? So there's apparently a gears that gets Maika Amrla, because I think we're talking about where he's not actually giving her and saying anything; he's just giving it to her, right? So if they're not talking about getting married, and he just kind of gives her money, let's say it's not a ring, right? A ring is a kind of an engagement thing, but let's say he just gave her a pruta, and they're not talking about getting married. He just gives her a pruta, so then Minoyoda, how is she going to know that she's now engaged? So Amar Abai me'inin le'inin bo'oso inin. Well, no. What Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon is saying is they weren't talking about, oh, we're about to get married, and then he gives her a pruta, but they were talking about, okay, how are you going to make a parnasa? They were talking about important things related to them getting married, but not davka that, oh, we're going to get married, and then he gives her a pruta. But they're talking about related things. So Reb Shimon says even that would be acceptable. Amar Rafuna, Amar Shmuel Alacha, Reb Yossi says Rafuna in the name of Shmuel that Alacha is like Reb Yossi, that even if he doesn't say anything, but just gives her a ring, that's fine. Amar le Rav Yemar le Rav Ashi ve'elo hada Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. That which Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel. Kol she'enu yodea b'tivgin v'kiddushin lo yehelo esek imoim. That if a fellow does not know the halachas of gittin or the halachas of kiddushin, he should not paskin shilas and not be a posik, not right on that. He should not be a dayan when it comes to gittin and kiddushin. Right? Because you don't want to mess up with that stuff. So, afilu shmile ha d'afuna mashmul. So would that even apply to this halacha? That if you're taking the test, right? If you're taking the test to be a dayan, to be able to make rulings regarding gittin and kiddushin, would this question be on the test? Should it be on the test? The question of if a fellow gives kesef kiddushin and he doesn't say anything. Is that something that's considered part of the material that somebody who's learning the halachos of gittin and kiddushin needs to know? So Amar le'enachinami. So Rav Ashi responds to Rav Yemar that, if I understand correctly, yes, he should know this halacha as well. V'chein begerishin. So at the end of the daf yesterday, we had said v'chein begerishin. We explained that by giving a get. Nasun lagita v'amar la. He gives it a get, and he says to her, Hariat mishulachas, you are sent away. Hariat migoreshes, you are divorced. Hariat muteris l'chol adam, you are permitted to anybody, to any fellow. Hariat migoreshes, she is divorced. Now, this is a Gemara that we saw recently, I believe, in Masechta Gittin on daf Pei. So only about less than 2 weeks ago, we saw the same Gemara in a different Masechta Gittin. Pshita nasan lagita v'amar lo liishto. Okay, certainly it's obvious that if a fellow gives a get to his wife, and he says to her, Hariat baschorin, you're free. That doesn't work, because she was never not free. She was married, she wasn't unfree. Hariat baschorin is something that you say to a shifcha. It's not something that you say to a wife. So Amar la l'shifcha. So, and if he says to his shifcha, Hariat muteris l'chol adam, you're permitted to anybody. Lo amar v'lo klum. That also doesn't work, because you're freeing her, you're not making her permitted to everybody. Rashi points out that the truth is, a shifcha, she's not muteris to everybody, because when she was a shifcha, she was allowed to marry an Eved Kanaini, and now that she's free, she's a Yid, and she's Jewish, and she cannot. So she isn't actually permitted to everybody. So, lo amar v'lo klum, that doesn't work either. Omla li'ishto, if a fellow says to his wife, Hare'at le'atzmech ma'u, if a fellow says to his wife, you are on your own now. So, is that a divorce or not? Do we say limlocha kamela? We're saying you're on your own, pay for your own food, right? Do your own work. Or Dilma, maybe what he's saying is legamri kamela. Maybe he's saying, no, you're on your own, you're divorced. So the Ravina the Ravashi says Ravina to Ravashi Tashma Kamini the Tani is within the Brisa Gufa shel that shichur, that the body the text of a document of emancipation, Hariat ben Chorin, you are free. Alternatively, Hare atola atzmcha, you are on your own. So Hashtoma Eved Knaini Dekani Le Gufe. So if by an Eved Knaini, who the fellow owns his person, and Kiyamar Le Hariat La'atzmcha Legamri Karmele, when he says Hariat La'atzmcha, you're on your own, it means you're entirely on your own. I no longer own your person. So Isha Delokani Le Gufa, a wife which he doesn't own her person, Lo Koshikin, certainly Hariat La'atzmich should be enough to be a divorce, right? If by an Eved, it's enough to free an Eved who he owns his goof, certainly Hariat La'atzmich should be enough to be a divorce. Amr Ravina Ravashi, says Ravina Ravashi, Amr Abdo Ainli Esek B'chomai. What if a fellow says to his Eved, I don't have any dealings with you anymore? So when he says to his Eved, I don't have any dealings with you anymore, does that mean that you're free? Or does that mean that just, I don't know, do your own work and work for yourself? And I guess. So Amr Rav Nachman Ravashi says, Rav Nachman Ravashi, Va'amri la, Rav Chanan Mechozah Ravashi, Tashma Kaminir, Hamocher Abdo la Ovid Kochavim. If a fellow sells his Eved to an Ovid Kochavim, which he can't do, because an Eved is chayiv mitzvahs, he's not allowed to sell to Ovid Kochavim, Yotze Lecheres, he goes free. The Eved goes free. I mean, I guess if he gets away from this Ovid Kochavim, he's now free. V'tzarich get shichra merab rishon, but his initial master, his Jewish master, would still need to write a get shichra so that he can marry a Jewish woman. Amr Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Bamed V'amrum Shelo Kosav Alav Ono, says Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, that's only if he didn't write Ono. Aval Kosav Alav Ono Zeu Shichru, but if he wrote Ono, so then he doesn't have to write a separate get shichra. Eichidami Ono, what's this Ono? Amr Rav Sheshes the Kosav Le Kishetivrach Mimenu Ein Li Esek Bach. Says Rav Sheshes, well, Ono means that if he already wrote to his Eved that if you run away from this Ovid Kochavim, I have Ein Li Esek Bach, then I have no dealings with you. So then that means, so he doesn't have to write a separate get shichra, that's enough. I.e., Ein Li Esek Bach is enough to free an Eved. So we see that if a fellow says to his Eved, Ein Li Esek Bach, then that means that he is free. Omer Abai says, Abai Mekadesh b'milveh, Eina Mekudeshes. Oh, so if a fellow is Mekadesh a woman with a loan, Eina Mekudeshes, she is not betrothed. What does that mean? How does that work? It means that if a fellow lent a woman, let's just say 4 prutas, just because I think that's gonna, let's say 4 prutas, because that's gonna be, the Gemara is gonna give that as an example essentially in a minute. So let's go with that. So a fellow lends a fella 4 prutas, and then at a different point he says, you know what? Keep the 4 prutas, don't pay me back. Keep it, that'll be your kesef Kiddushin. So Eina Mekudeshes, right, that doesn't work. You can't be Mekadesh a woman by canceling a loan. You have to, right? I think does Rashi point out, I think that Rashi points out milvelo tza nitna. I don't know how much we have to get into this. It's not that hard anyways, but that when you give, if I lend you $100, I'm not expecting you're going to give me back that $100 bill. I'm expecting that, it's yours, spend it, do whatever you want, just give me back a different $100 bill. So therefore, Kilu, when he gives her the money, it's already hers from the time that she received it as a loan. When he cancels it, he's not giving her anything. And Kesef Kiddushin, he has to give her something. But if he's Mekadesh her with the benefit of a loan, well then, that works, but Ribis will explain what this means in a minute. But you don't do this, even though technically hanoas, the benefit of a loan works, but we don't do this ribis because it's not exactly interest, but it's like a close relative of interest. So hanoas milvei chidami. So what is this benefit of a loan that you shouldn't be mekadesh with, but if you did, it technically works? If you're going to say, well, he lent her 4 prutas, and the deal was that she had to pay him back 5 prutas, and he says, you know what, that extra pruta you can keep. So he's being Mekadesh with that pruta. So haribis ma'ayahu, but that's just classic ribis. That's just classic interest, right? You lent her 4 and is asking for 5 back. That's just classic ribis. Why are we saying that it's a relative of ribis? It's actually ribis. It's actually interest. And also this is simply a loan, right? He lent her money, right? He's basically just canceling the loan. So, or part of it. So lo tzricha de arvach la zimna. No, so what it's talking about is where he lent her the 4 prutas. But she wants an extension on the loan. So getting an extension on the loan has a certain value, right? A person would be willing to, let's say, pay somebody, right? Rashi gives an example. She might be willing to pay this guy's friend to convince him to extend the loan, extend the time of the loan. So meaning you could put, monetary value on a loan extension. And when he grants her that loan extension and he's makadesh her with the value of that loan extension that he's extending the loan, so that is what he's being makadesh her with. And we say, technically speaking, I guess he's giving her value and being makadesh her with that value, but don't do it because apparently it's like a relative of ribis, because he's lending her one thing and she has to pay back something else. And okay, fine. Amar Rava says, Rava, heilach mone al menashe tachzereu li. A fellow says to somebody, here's $100. I want you to then return it to me. Here's the $100. I want you to return it to me. B'mecher lo kano. So if that's by, buying something, it doesn't work, right? If he's buying property and he says, okay, here's the money for the property, and then I want you to give it back to me. That doesn't work. Be'isha eni mekudeshes. If he gives a woman, a fellow gives a fella a pruta, and he says, right, here's the pruta, I want you to give it back to me. That doesn't work for Kiddushin. Bepidyon aben. If you give money to a kohen to redeem your son, and then you say, I want the money back, but I'm going to want the money back, that won't work for pidyon aben. Betruma, if a fellow gives his truma to a kohen and says, look, I'm giving you this truma, but I want you to give it back to me so that I can then sell it to somebody else and get benefit from it, that also doesn't work, because it's similar to like a kohen who works in the granary and gets paid back gets paid with truma. That there's a Gemara in Bechoris apparently that says that it's like basically profaning the truma, being machal the truma. So basically, in all of these cases, it sounds like, so in the first cases, right, by the purchase, by the kiddushin, by pidyon aben, it doesn't work at all. If you say, I'm giving you the money and then you're going to give it back to me. By truma, we say it technically works, but you shouldn't do it. So now, my kasav, Rava, what does Rava hold here? If you say that giving a gift with the under the condition that you give it back is not considered giving it, and that is why, if I pay for a field and say, but you have to give it back to me, it doesn't work. But afilu kulu nami. But wait, what did I just say? I'm sorry, if you say shma matana, that it is a good gift, well, afilu kulu nami, well then all of them should work, right? If we say matana amanach la'achzer shma matana, that if I give you $1,000 under the condition that you give it back to me, it is considered like I gave it to you, so then it should work by the field, it should work by Kiddushin, it should work by pidyon aben, right? If I buy the field, you're selling me your field, and I say, here's the money for the field, but I want you to give it back to me. If we say matana amanach la'achzer shma matana, so that should be fine. Because lo shma matana, if we say that it's not fine, well then afilu truma nami lo, well then it shouldn't work by truma. We said that if you give the truma to a kohen and say, but I want you to give it back to me, technically speaking it works, but if we say matana amanas la'achzir lo shma matana, that should not work at all. Ve'od, and more so, haravahu de amar matana amanas la'achzir shma matana. But we also know that Rava Taka holds that matana amanas la'achzir does work. Okay, so now that we know that Rava holds matana amanas la'achzir shma matana, well then how come we're saying that in these cases, right, if I buy a field and say, but I want you to give me the money back, it doesn't work, why not? Matana amanas la'achzir shma matana. Dama Rava, we know this because Rava says, Heilach esrig, we learned this in Masechta Sukkah, that if a fellow says, Heilach esrig, right, because you need, on the first day of Sukkis, right, ulekachtem lochem, it has to belong to you. So if a fellow doesn't have an arba minim, so if a fellow says, the Amar Rava, Heilach esrig zeh, here, take this esrig, Almanas, it's your esrog now, I'm giving it to you. Almanas shetachzireu li, under the condition that you then give it back to me. Nitala v'chzir, so if the guy took the esrog and then gave it back, yotza, so he fulfilled his obligation of having his own esrog, because it was given to him as a gift, and the condition was that he gives it back. So as long as he gave it back, then the gift was valid. If he doesn't give it back, lo yotza, then he's not yotze, because it was only given to him under the condition that he gives it back. So we see that matana amanas lachzir shma matana. So Elo Amar Ravashi, rather says Ravashi, b'chulu kani. Now in all of those cases, the taka does work. If you buy the field under the condition that you get the money back, it does work. Because matana amanas lachzir shma matana. Levar me'isha, the only place where it doesn't work is by Kiddushin. If a fellow gives a pruta under the condition that it's given back to him, that does not work. Because we learned the other day that Kiddushin does not work with Chalifin, right? That Kinyan Sudar, that if, right, well, how would a Kinyan Chalifin work? Well, if you would, I think potentially how it would work is he would give her a pen, she picks it up, and then by her picking up the pen, which she'll then give back to him, but by her by her picking up the pen, she's now there's now a Kinyan and they're now married, or betrothed. So we said you can't do a Kinyan Sudar because that could be with even less than a Shavar Pruta. And now in this case, when he gives her the Pruta with the intention to give it back to him, it's like it's a Kinyan Sudar, it's like it's a Kinyan Chalifin, and that doesn't work by Kiddushin. So therefore, we say that by Kiddushin, don't give don't give the money with the intention of getting it back. That we say in the name of Rava, like you. Okay, so it's confirmed that it's like Ravashi. Friends, that was the Avav of Masechta Kiddushin. We learned about all these different Lashonis of, you're my bone and stuff, random things of Kiddushin. We said Teku, we said Echveisnish. Okay, we talked about how if a fellow gives Kiddushin, Kesef Kiddushin to his wife, even if he doesn't say anything. We saw Machlokas between Rabbi Yossi, who says it works, and Rabbi Yehuda who says you would have to say Ariat Mikudeshesli. We learned about different Lashonis of Kiddushin that could work. And then, we learned about Mekadesh B'milva Eini Mekudeshes, which is an interesting sugya. And then we, at the very end, learned about Matana Amanas Lahachzir Shma Matana, but it doesn't work by Kiddushin because it's similar to Kinyan Chalifin, which does not work by Kiddushin. Friends, that was Daf Vav of Masechta Kiddushin. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you're enjoying Masechta Kiddushin. Peace out.